AP historians. This is Wendy with AP History Help, and this is the AP History Help podcast, where you will learn everything you need to know about taking AP history classes, from skills to content, from historical thinking skills to themes in history. Whether you are taking or thinking about taking AP World History, AP US History, or AP European History, this podcast is for you. Be sure to check out the episode list and the show notes to find the topics that you need help with. Email me at wendy@aphistoryhelp.com with questions that I might answer on future episodes. You can also follow and interact with me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at AP History Help. Whew, that long essay question, or LEQ, it is the last question on the AP exam, and honestly the hardest part of the test. But I am here today to help you navigate this question, from understanding the rubric, knowing what your choices will be, and a few other tips and strategies to finish the exam strong. Just like other FRQs, free response questions, if you plan to take another AP history course next year or the year after, you will use the same skills to hit the ground running at the beginning of the course. So efforts on your part now could pay off in dividends in the future. But first, if you haven't already done so, make sure that you listen to my last episode, which will give you a good start on how to write the DBQ essay, from the rubric to all the particulars. That episode was so long, I cut out my special segments to fit in as much as possible. The good news is that if you didn't listen, you can just go to your podcast player, my website, aphistoryhelp.com, or even to YouTube and look for episode 10 of AP History Help. That's right, they're all on demand for your listening pleasure. As we're approaching the end of the semester, it is really time for you to start reviewing. That's right, if you are striving for a 5, you need to get a little more serious about your preparation. Have you checked out my AP History Success Journal? It's available for print on my website and hopefully coming real soon on Amazon. I have it set up to be a weekly companion on your journey to acing the AP exam. Now, on to today's episode. Many teachers don't attempt practicing this essay until the second semester. Why? Well, because you can't handle the truth. Well, not really, but it's more about getting some content knowledge under your belt. Because on this question, you get no help from documents. You have to pull all of that knowledge out of your head and plop it down on paper and fill up a couple of pages in order to get a good score. Like I said in the intro, this is the last part of the AP exam, and you've been sitting there for over 2 hours, and you have to muster up the strength to read 3 prompts and make the effort to pick which one you can write best. And then you have to write it. What's an AP history student to do? Well, know thy rubric. Yes, know in advance what is going to be expected of you and how to get each of those points. The good news is that it's similar to the DBQ rubric minus the documents. So follow along, and yes, it is the same for AP World, APUSH, and AP Euro. The LEQ is worth 6 points as compared to the DBQ's 7-point rubric. The points are for writing a thesis, contextualizing the topic, bringing in historical evidence, and then analyzing and reasoning. Yes, I'm going to explain them. From the top, your thesis must respond to the prompt and be historically defensible. That means you need to restate what the prompt is asking you to do and then make a claim. For example, if the prompt says, "To what extent was the sky blue today?" You might check with the weatherman, weather.com, and you might look out the window and take a picture. Using that evidence, you make the claim that the sky was completely blue in your town on today's date as there was not a cloud in the sky. However, the key here is that you don't have those documents to help you. So you have to go off on what's in your head. So make sure that whatever you're going to claim, that you have evidence in your brain to back it up. Next, painting the picture, setting the stage. According to College Board, you need to accurately describe the broader historical context that is relevant to the prompt. Just like the DBQ, it's the crawler at the beginning of your movie that brings the viewer up to speed. Perhaps with my blue sky example, you state that you rarely have clear skies in your town, or that it has been raining for a week and blue skies are a distant memory. Next is the evidence that will be used to prove your claim. You get 2 points here. One of the points is for providing at least 2 pieces of evidence relevant to the topic or claim in your thesis. The second point is using those 2 pieces of evidence to support your argument. So in point 1, you're just listing out information related to the topic. But to support your argument, you need to explicitly connect the evidence to your argument. Episode 14 of the podcast in a few weeks will delve further into this difference and how you can effectively do this. Our last 2 points are going to be separated into using historical reasoning and demonstrating complex understanding through a sophisticated argument or effective use of evidence. The analysis point requires that you use historical reasoning, for example, comparison, causation, continuity, and change, to structure your argument. And the complexity point demands that you demonstrate a higher level of understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt, either through a sophisticated argument or effective use of evidence. In other words, there are 2 directions to go in. One way is either explain multiple themes or perspectives to further explore the topic, or multiple causes and effects, or multiple similarities and differences, or continuities or changes. And the second way is to bring in at least 4 pieces of relevant evidence rather than 2. Or use your evidence to demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of different perspectives. Technically, you'd only need to do one of those things, but hedge your bets and do 2 of them if you can. Believe it or not, this is much easier to get than it was before they changed the rubric back in August of 2023. Hey, guess what? It is time for Wendy Teaches History. It's back. With this episode being released a week before Christmas, I thought I'd share some interesting information about the holiday. Did you know that Jesus' birth was not celebrated until over 300 years after Jesus was born? The date likely coincides with Christianity being allowed to be celebrated in the Roman Empire by Constantine in 313 by way of the Edict of Milan. And the word Christmas wasn't even used until 1038 in England, coming from Christ's Mass. It's most likely that Jesus was not born in December, but in the spring. However, Pope Julius I chose December 25th because it coincided with 3 Roman pagan festivals. Saturnalia festival that honored Saturn, the god of agriculture. According to History.com, it began the week leading up to the winter solstice, also known as the first day of winter, and it continued for a full month. This was a hedonistic time when food and drink were plentiful and the Norman Roman social order was turned upside down. For a month, enslaved people were given temporary freedom and treated as equals. Businesses, schools were closed so that everyone could participate in the holiday's festivities. Now, around this same time, the Romans also observed Juvenalia, a feast honoring the children in Rome, and a third celebration, which happened right on December 25th, was the birthday of Mithra, the god of the unconquerable sun. This was the most sacred day of the year for some Romans. So Pope Julius, by holding Christmas at the same time as the traditional winter solstice festivals, allowed church leaders to increase the chances that Christmas would be popularly embraced. But they gave up the ability to dictate how it was celebrated. Now, by the Middle Ages, Christianity had, for the most part, replaced pagan religion. Two more interesting facts. One was that Christmas was canceled in 1645 in England. When Oliver Cromwell and his Puritan forces took over England in 1645, they vowed to rid England of decadence and, as part of their effort, canceled Christmas. By popular demand, Charles II was restored to the throne, and with him came the return of the popular holiday. The other fun fact is that after the American Revolution, English customs fell out of favor, including Christmas. In fact, Christmas wasn't declared a federal holiday in the United States until June 26, 1870. I'll cite my source in the show notes for all that information, and there's much more that I left out. It's a real good read. Next, we are going to talk about what to expect in the LEQ prompts. Details on content and time periods will vary depending on the course, but in addition to the same rubric, the things that are consistent across the three tests is that you get to choose one essay that you will write from 3 prompts. It is worth 15% of your overall grade, and you get the same amount of time. Speaking of time, if you listened to the DBQ episode of this podcast, you heard me talk about the time allotted to section 2 of the exam. You are given a total of 1 hour and 40 minutes for this entire section. The DBQ essay is the first part, and it is strongly recommended that you spend 60 minutes on the DBQ and 40 minutes on the LEQ. Notice there are those qualifiers in there. Strongly recommended, suggest. That means you are given 1 hour and 40 minutes to do whatever you want. However, if you want to be successful on the exam, you should save the last 40 minutes for the LEQ. Next, let's look at the types of prompts. In the most recent exam, the LEQs began with evaluate the extent to which, evaluate the most significant, develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which. Do you hear a pattern? What does that mean, to evaluate? If I asked you to evaluate your teachers at school, how would you go about doing that? Come up with categories to rate them and determine where they fall, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10 or high, middle, low. Then you would arrive at a conclusion as to which is the best and why, and or worst and why. The College Board wants you to do that for the LEQ. For example, evaluate the extent to which ongoing cross-cultural interactions affected trade and or exploration during the period 1450 to 1750. You have to know what those cross-cultural interactions were and what the effects were on trade or exploration, and then you rate them, or better yet, evaluate them. I always like to go back to social, political, cultural, and economic categories as a solid way to look at cause, effect, or pretty much any historical thinking skill assessed on the LEQ. But this is a whole other topic for a whole other day, namely episode 21. Yep, I've got them all planned out for the next half a year or so before we get into specific content. As I mentioned before, you will select one of the 3 long essay questions to write your essay on. In world history, the first prompt is from 1200 to 1750. The second is from 1450 to 1900, and the last can be from 1750 to 2001. It's a good idea to be solid on that middle time period of 1450 to 1900, as you probably noted the overlap. AP European also has some overlap. Prompt 1 is between 1450 and 1700. Prompt 2 covers 1648 to 1914, and the third is 1815 to 2001. So again, really focus on the content from 1648 to 1914. For APUSH, prompt 1 will be 1491 to 1800. The second one is 1800 to 1898, and the third is 1890 to 2001. You don't get a lot of overlap there, unfortunately. In general, you should look at each of the time periods and make sure you're aware of some of the major historical developments and processes of those time periods. Again, focusing on social, political, cultural, and economic. And honestly, look at some of the previous prompts that have been on the AP exams to get an understanding of what to expect and what you should study. There are definitely topics that seem to repeat every couple years. Not sure where to find these? I'd be happy to help. Just shoot me an email at wendy@aphistoryhelp.com. One of the best ways to figure out how to write a good LEQ essay is to read exemplars. Ideally, find one that you could answer yourself. Brainstorm on the prompt to decide what you could write from the context and the thesis to at least 2, if not 4 pieces of evidence. Then which historical thinking skills or perspectives would you use? You don't necessarily have to write the whole thing, but spend a good 10 to 15 minutes planning it like you would. Then read the exemplar, one that earned a 5 or a 6, so you can see how someone else did it. If you don't have access to graded samples of the LEQs, or even the DBQs for that matter, I happen to know someone who does. If I had a mirror, I'd be looking at her right now. If you send me an email with your course and where you currently are content-wise, I will send you an exemplar, or better yet, sign up for a 30-minute tutoring session with me and we'll go over the process and the exemplar together. Either email me at wendy@aphistoryhelp.com, or I'll put a link for the tutoring session in the show notes. Just to give you the podcast discount, if you set up a session through email, you'll save about 30% off the price that OutSchool charges. Just saying. Next episode, I'll be taking a deep dive into contextualization. You heard me talk about it today and in the DBQ episode because it earns you a point on each. But it's also an important historical thinking skill that you should be implementing throughout your study of history. Hit that follow or subscribe button so you'll be notified whenever a new episode airs. Do me a favor and email me at wendy@aphistoryhelp.com if you have any questions or suggestions, or just to tell me that you listened to or watched the show, or if you're needing feedback on an LEQ essay. Hey, if you email me and tell me you listened to this episode, I'll give you 25% off a tutoring session. That's wendy@aphistoryhelp.com. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok at aphistoryhelp. Did you know that the podcast also airs in video form on YouTube? The people who watch it on YouTube knew that. Hey YouTubers, did you know that you could listen to this in audio form only? Anyway, the YouTube channel is called AP History Help. I'll link to it in the show notes. If you subscribe there, you'll get notified every other week when a new episode is uploaded. Whether it's social media or YouTube, you'll be able to comment, ask questions, and interact with me there. Tell your friends who are taking or thinking about taking AP History classes about the podcast. I'm here to help as many students as possible to be successful in the course and on the exam. That will do it for this week's episode. Don't forget to come to Wendy for AP History Help. This episode of the AP History Help podcast is now history.